When I first started using Linux, it took me a while to get my head around the idea that I don't easily have access to do anything that I want on the system. That is not the case for Windows. In Windows, you actually start with an admin account, which is what makes things super dangerous on a Windows system. Now, the first time I booted up a fresh install of Ubuntu, I'd already gone through the install process, set myself as an admin user, did all the stuff, went in the command line, was excited to run my first command apt update, and I got the dreaded Linux permissions error. It's like, yo, dude, you don't have permissions. You can't do that. That's when I had to do some research. And once I finished that research, what I realized is that I needed an additional preface to that command, which was going to be super user do or the sudo command. Now, once I prefaced it with sudo, it worked. Anyone using a Unix-like system is very familiar with this command. It's been around since 1980. It's been a staple of the Linux command line for decades at this point, but that may soon be changing. Canonical, Ubuntu's parent company, has stated that starting with Ubuntu 25.10, they're going to start using sudo-rs as the default version of sudo. Now, what is sudo-rs? Well, let's talk about it on this episode of Linux Sundays. I have a favor to ask. If you like this type of video and want to see more content like it, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications. Also, don't forget to give this video a like if you like it. Let me know what you liked, didn't like, or if you have any comments, questions, concerns, or emotional outbursts down in the comments below. And lastly, make sure to stick around all the way to the end to get the most out of this video. Let's do this thing. So if you were around in the beginning of my channel back in 2020, I started a series called Linux Sundays, where I would cover a Linux topic related to Linux news on Sundays. Well, that series only lasted about 5 or 6 episodes, and I think this is episode 6, so I wanted to go ahead and revive it because I really do enjoy having a weekly thing to look forward to. So let me know what you think down in the comments. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about all things sudo. Put myself down here. Got the sudo man page up here. Now, the sudo command allows us to execute a command as another user. By default, that's going to be the super user, which is just like the admin user on a Windows system. It's coded in the C programming language and is currently maintained by a gentleman by the name of Todd C. Miller. Sudo actually has its own website, which I think is pretty awesome. It's actually sudo.ws, where you can read about all things sudo. Probably the only place in the world that has more information than the sudo man page. Now, the sudo command is actually closely related to the su command, and if you're not familiar, the su command is the command used to switch users. Now, the existing implementation of sudo has tons of features, including allowing sudo commands to be logged, so you know exactly who's running what. It also includes a ticketing system that allows a user to run sudo commands for a specified period of time. Now, it has a file that kind of governs the configuration, which is going to be the sudo-rs file right here, which is going to be the etc sudo-rs file, and it basically determines a user's sudo privileges and what types of sudo commands they are going to be able to do. It also does it for the groups as well. You can actually also safely update it with this sudo command, which allows you to safely edit the sudo-rs file. Pretty straightforward. Now, if you're ever curious what permissions you have in sudo, you can do sudo tac-l. This right here says that I can go ahead and run sudo as all commands, and I don't even need a password for those, which is pretty crazy. This is just a temporary virtual machine, so that's going to be a good thing. But I have to say, though, now, sudo is a pretty full-featured command. You know, as we can see if we do the sudo tac help out. And we can see we've got all these different options here and things like that. But it has one persistent problem. Vulnerabilities, which is honestly common for pretty much any software that is out there. One of the most serious vulnerabilities, though, for sudo is going to be memory vulnerabilities. Now, the maintainer, Todd, of sudo keeps a running list of the vulnerabilities, with the most recent being a local privilege escalation using chroot from June of 2025. Now, privilege escalation, if you're not familiar, is just basically getting your user more permissions through nefarious means or tricky means than the permissions that are assigned to you by default. Now, all applications will eventually have vulnerabilities, but because sudo is coded in C, it is much more likely to have issues with the vulnerabilities than applications coded in more secure languages such as Rust. Now, there's a few examples. I want to give you a few examples of common memory vulnerabilities. Now, you have something that's known as an out-of-bounds read or write, and this happens when memory is able to read or write to before or after the valid content. So there's a space in memory, or when we say memory, we're talking about RAM, and it's able to go ahead and say, like, you have a list of like 10 things, and then you're able to kind of read the stuff at the before or after the space that's being used in data. Anything that's before or after that list of 10 things. Now, it also has something that's called a use after free. Now, so after a program has finished with its with whatever it's doing, and its allocated memory should be given back to the system. But if you have a use after free vulnerability, the data is still accessible even though it has been given back to the system. So think of deleting data and then being able to access that data after it should not be accessible anymore. Now, one statistic that I saw that was pretty interesting was across iOS, macOS, Windows, and Android, memory vulnerabilities account for more than 60% of vulnerabilities. Now, one of the big ways to help minimize these vulnerabilities is to use a memory-safe programming language, which is exactly what's happened with this new implementation of sudo as sudo-rs. Now, it actually has its own man page, and you go ahead and clear. Oh, let me go and clear this out. We're gonna do man. It's just sudo here, because if you weren't paying close attention, if you looked at the man page I previously ran, it said sudo.ws, which is how it's going to be used on the future implementation on Ubuntu 25.10. So let's go ahead and do that. And man sudo. And you can actually see up here at the top, it says sudo-rs, and it says sudo edit execute a command as another user. So that's already the same as previous sudo. Now the basic functions are still going to be there. So if you're an average user, you're not going to really notice it, and most of the functionality that you're going to use it for is going to be there. So really, for average users, you can think of it as a streamlined version of sudo. Now, the developers wanted to take a less is more approach and are removing some of the previous functionality to reduce the attack surface and bring sudo in line with more modern security practices. Now, again, the average user is not going to notice the difference as sudo-rs because it's actually going to be soft linked to sudo, which we can kind of already get an indication from what we're seeing here when we man the sudo file. Now, honestly, I'm pretty happy about this because I don't have to really worry. Like when I first saw this, I was like, what the heck? I'm gonna have to learn a new command. And then once I realized they linked it, I was like, okay, cool. So I don't have to relearn the muscle memory, which is great. So there are examples of a few features that are not going to be included. Like sudo has a send mail feature that allows for sudo to use notifications to let you know about usage. That's not going to be there. It's also going to not allow wildcards to prevent configuration mistakes in the sudo-rs file. Now, one enhancement is that it will always use PAM or pluggable authentication modules. So some configuration will be done directly through PAM instead of using the sudo-rs file as it's been done in the past. So there will be a bit of a learning curve as far as that type of configuration goes. Now, if you absolutely have to use classic sudo, you can always use sudo.ws. That is supposed to be in place until at least Ubuntu 26.10. You can also set it to use the default, sudo.ws using the update alternatives command. So this is actually the virtual machine I've been using for demonstration here is actually an Ubuntu 25.10 daily testing build. So I wanted to be able to show you hands-on kind of stuff with what we're going to be looking at as far as these commands go. So, if we want to run sudo it's going to run that. Let's see, sudo. Sudo apt update. See, there it goes. It's working just fine. Now, if I want to go ahead and run the same thing, I didn't update this before, so that's why it's running through all this crap. Sudo. Let's do sudo.ws. Sudo.ws apt update. We're just going to run the same command again. And it's going to run through all that. And there we go. We can see that both sudo, which is sudo attack-rs, and sudo .ws actually both work without any kind of hitches. Now, if you want to set the previous version, the classic sudo, if you will, as the default, what you can do is you can use this command. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Which is going to be the sudo update tac alternatives, tac config sudo. All right, and go with 2 because we want to use that one. I'm sorry, oops, actually 1 because we want to use sudo.ws. All right, and if you see that here, it says update alternatives using to provide user bin sudo in manual mode. I'm curious if that changes the man page. And it does. Yeah, see, we can tell already that it's gone back to using the default. So pretty cool. That was a pretty cool. Thing that they've put in place, to make sure that they're allowing, those who still want to keep using classic sudo available. Now, I know there's going to be strong opinions about this change, but I think it's great, to be honest. You're bringing sudo into the modern age, and honestly, there's another channel out there that I watch, and like one of their things they always say on there is the past is the worst. And honestly, the past has been great, but we do want to allow things to evolve, and that's exactly what's happening here. Now, a few other things though that are going to be happening is they are also going to be updating core utils, fine utils, and diff utils in Rust, but that's a topic for another video. So make sure to check out this other video from my channel if you want to check out those really old videos of the of Linux Sundays. Also, be my guest. Remember, mistakes make you better, so keep on making them. Thank you so much for watching my video, and have the greatest of days.